Steven Spielberg is often hailed as the master of the visual reveal. He is the man who showed us the Brachiosaurus in Jurassic Park and the mothership in Close Encounters. He is the master of showing you exactly what you need to see to feel wonder. But in 1975, while filming Jaws, he realized that his greatest weapon wasn't what he could show the audience, but it was what he could take away.
When I first hear the word Jaws, I just think of a period in my life when I was much younger than I am right now.
We all know the legend, a mechanical shark that refused to work, a production plagued by rising tides and sinking budgets, and a young director on the verge of a total nervous breakdown. It is a miracle of cinema that the movie was finished at all. But buried in the archives of Universal Pictures is a secret. A scene that was fully conceptualized, storyboarded, and nearly immortalized on celluloid. A scene that would have fundamentally altered the third act of the film. It was a moment of pure, visceral horror, a scene that depicted the great white not as a natural predator, but as a calculated, vengeful demon. And then, at the final hour, Spielberg killed it. This is the story of the missing massacre. The one scene Spielberg refused to keep because he realized that if he showed too much, he would lose the one thing that made Jaws immortal, our imagination. This decision didn't just save the movie, it invented the modern blockbuster. To understand the scene that was cut, we have to first dive into the technical nightmare that necessitated its removal. In the 1970s, CGI didn't exist. If you wanted a 25-foot shark, you had to build one. The task fell to production designer Joe Alvis and special effects expert Bob Matty. They created 3 full-sized pneumatic sharks, collectively nicknamed Bruce after Spielberg's lawyer. On paper, Bruce was a marvel of engineering. He was designed to swim, bite, and thrash with terrifying realism. But the production made one fatal mistake. They decided to film on the actual ocean rather than a controlled studio tank. The Atlantic Ocean was not a hospitable host. The first time the crew lowered the million-dollar shark into the water, it didn't swim. It sank straight to the sandy bottom like a lead weight. Divers had to be sent down to retrieve the star of the movie. But that was just the beginning. The salt water corroded the delicate hydraulic lines. The neoprene skin, meant to look like sleek shark hide, acted like a sponge, soaking up water until the shark bloated and its skin began to peel away in unsightly patches. The shark's eyes, meant to look like the black eyes of a killer, turned a strange, sickly yellow under the sun, making Bruce look more like a cheap carnival prize than a prehistoric predator. Every day that the shark remained broken was a day Steven Spielberg spent staring at the horizon, listening to the mounting costs and the whispers of the studio executives in Los Angeles who were ready to pull the plug. Beyond the mechanical failure of the shark, Spielberg was dealing with a human storm on the deck of the Orca. The friction between Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss wasn't just movie magic, it was a volatile clash of egos that threatened to sink the production from within. Shaw, a seasoned, hard-drinking veteran, saw the young, intellectual Dreyfuss as a nuisance. He would taunt him, challenge his acting, and even offer him money to stop talking. Spielberg, trapped in the middle of this maritime feud, realized that the true horror wasn't just under the water. It was the psychological warfare happening between these 3 men. If the shark had worked perfectly, Spielberg might have relied on simple action beats to carry the third act. Instead, the shark's failure forced him to point his camera at the raw, jagged edges of human interaction. This forced pivot is why the audience feels so connected to the crew. We aren't just watching a hunt, we're watching a survival drama where the monster is merely the catalyst for a deeper internal collapse of the characters themselves. However, this failure forced a creative evolution that would change cinema history. Because he couldn't show the shark, Spielberg had to find placeholders for fear. He used the iconic yellow barrels to show the shark's path. He used John Williams' legendary 2-note pulse to signal its presence. He used point-of-view shots where the camera became the predator, prowling beneath the surface. He was accidentally inventing the Hitchcockian shark. But as the production moved into the final high-stakes hunt aboard the Orca, the pressure changed. The studio wanted a payoff for the millions they had spent. The crew wanted to see their hard work, and their mechanical monster finally took center stage. Spielberg himself worried that after 90 minutes of teasing the audience, he needed to deliver a moment of overwhelming, logic-defying power. He wanted a scene that would leave no doubt that this wasn't just a fish, it was a nightmare made of teeth and muscle. In the original script, and in the early storyboards that fueled the production's middle months, there was a sequence known to the crew as the Pontoon Massacre. At this point in the film, Chief Brody, Matt Hooper, and the grizzled shark hunter Quint are out on the open sea. They are miles from shore, isolated and vulnerable. But in the original draft, they weren't entirely alone. The town of Amity had offered a massive bounty for the shark, and the massacre scene involved a group of local bounty hunters, amateurs in small, flimsy boats and makeshift rafts who had followed the orca out into the deep water. They were driven by greed, hoping to steal Quint's glory and the town's reward money. The scene was designed to be a technical tour de force, the ultimate money shot that would justify the film's budget. The shark was scripted to surface directly beneath one of these small boats, a pontoon vessel crowded with 4 men. In a terrifying display of strength, the great white wasn't just supposed to bite. It was supposed to breach, physically lifting the boat out of the water and snapping it in half like a dry twig. As the men fell into the churning water, the scene was scripted to become a red mist of gore. It wasn't a quick or clean death, it was a systematic, prolonged slaughter. The shark was to drag the men down one by one, surfacing between attacks to reveal its massive, blood-stained maw. It was designed to be the film's most violent moment, unfiltered R-rated carnage that would satisfy the gore hounds of the 70s. When the Pontoon Massacre was finally cut from the shooting schedule, the film transformed. The shark became something more than a great white. It became a symbol. It didn't need to kill 20 people to be scary. It only needed to kill one man we had grown to respect. It only needed to kill Quint. There is a psychological principle at play here that Spielberg mastered in Jaws, the projection of fear. When we don't see the shark, our brain fills in the gaps. We imagine a creature that is faster, larger, and more intelligent than any mechanical prop could ever be. The Pontoon Massacre would have defined the shark's limits. It would have told the audience, this is exactly how big it is, and this is exactly how it kills. By removing that scene, Spielberg kept the shark's power infinite. It became an elemental force of nature, like a hurricane or an earthquake. You can't fight a hurricane with a spear. You can only hope to survive it. This shift from monster movie to existential survival is what elevated Jaws into the realm of high art. The removal of the massacre is why the ending of Jaws remains the most satisfying climax in cinema history. When Chief Brody, the man who is terrified of the water, finally stands on the mast of the sinking orca and stares down the beast, we aren't thinking about a monster movie. We are thinking about a man facing his greatest personal fear. If Spielberg had kept the massacre, the explosion of the air tank would have felt like just another stunt in an action movie. But because he withheld the gore and the full reveal for so long, that explosion felt like a cathartic release for the entire world. It wasn't just the shark blowing up, it was the tension of the last 2 hours finally being released in a burst of fire and sea foam. This decision changed Hollywood forever. It created a before Jaws and after Jaws era. Before Jaws, horror and creature movies were often about the reveal. You showed the monster as often as possible to get your money's worth. After Jaws, the less is more philosophy became the gold standard for every major director. Think about Ridley Scott's Alien. Think about Predator. Think about the Blair Witch Project. These films owe their entire structural existence to the day Steven Spielberg looked at a storyboard of a sinking pontoon boat and said, no. He realized that the art of cinema is not the art of what you put on the screen, it is the art of editing. It is about knowing what to leave on the cutting room floor. By refusing to show the missing massacre, Spielberg didn't just save his movie, he taught us how to be afraid of the water again. While the scene was never filmed in its entirety, the storyboards still exist in the Universal Archives. They show a much darker, much more cynical version of Jaws. In that version, the town of Amity isn't just a victim of a shark, it's a victim of its own greed. The bounty hunters' deaths were meant to serve as a punishment for their interference and their desire for money. But Spielberg, even at 27, knew that the audience didn't need to see punishment. They needed to see struggle. He knew that a story about 3 men trying to survive was more powerful than a story about a dozen men being punished by a monster. The removal of this scene is the ultimate proof of Spielberg's genius. He took a broken mechanical toy, a series of production disasters, and a group of actors who were often at each other's throats, and he turned them into a masterclass in psychological restraint. Steven Spielberg understood the fundamental truth. The audience's mind is a much more terrifying place than any film set. The scene Spielberg refused to keep didn't just save the movie's budget, it saved the movie's soul. It moved Jaws from the B-movie bin into the halls of cinematic history. It proved that sometimes the most powerful thing a director can do is say no to the spectacle and yes to the silence. Jaws is not a movie about a shark. It is a movie about the fear of a shark. And that fear is only possible because of the scenes we never saw. The missing massacre remains the most important part of the movie, specifically because it isn't there. It is the ghost in the machine, the shadow in the water that keeps us from swimming too far from the shore. So where do you stand? Was cutting the missing massacre the moment Jaws became legendary? Or do you think one final reveal would have made it even stronger? Drop your take below. Because if this film still whispers a warning every time you look at open water, you already understand the power of what we never saw.